Hello? Yeah. Hassan decided we were allowed to bring our beers on stage, so hopefully we won't get in
I
trouble.
asked nicely. I asked nicely.
Will you cheers me?
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers to you guys.
Thank you to our drink sponsors. So I'm very excited to chat with you. We've been Zooming a bit. We had a little low-key FaceTime recently, but this is our first time meeting in person. The meeting of the Twitter minds.
I feel like I don't have a good grasp on whether I've met someone in person because
Yeah.
I feel so familiar with you.
Yeah, we have a
feel like
bond.
I've followed you for a long time.
Ditto, ditto.
And I'm like, wait, no, that's definitely you.
Yeah.
Didn't like, you know?
So I do have some prepared questions, but obviously we're just going to kind of shoot the shit a little bit. But just for people who aren't familiar, I kind of wanted to start with a little bit of like light intro. Mostly your work blends so many different aesthetic influences from Japanese photography to car culture. I'm really curious sort of where and how you find your inspiration, and also specifically what's inspiring you the most right now or has been most impactful on you recently.
Okay, I'm gonna like distill that question. I feel like it's rooted in you're saying that my influences are versatile.
I am.
Okay, and I have to blame skateboarding for that. So I think that like
Yeah, I heard some snaps for that one.
no, I think skateboarding was mind you, I'm growing up in Santa Ana, which is like a little suburb outside of LA in Orange County, and didn't really have a ton of like, I think skateboarding wasn't cool yet. It was like pre-Tony Hawk skateboarder. And watching skate videos and like watching different skaters have like the different songs and different styles in their videos kind of like gave me the eclectic sensibilities. So you'd have like a Biggie song and then a Black Sabbath track. And yeah, I think that plus like, no, I think it's just skateboarding. Yeah.
And, well, in the magazines too, I know like Thrasher and, there's obviously like Trans World have such a sort of like visual impact as well.
Yeah, I think that like magazines were sort of a means to, I started collaging. My mom had like a really random like at-home business. She was starting to do like booking people cruises and like vacations from home. So she had one of those little, the like classic internet like wood desk with the slide out keyboard tray.
I always call this back when the internet used to be a place.
Yes.
I mean, a place in your home.
We had that
not
place.
something in your pocket, which really
Yeah.
like dates us at a very particular age. Like,
Yeah, or I don't know how kind of old, but we had that little place, and that to me was this little sanctuary because the outside world just kind of was not very stimulating sometimes. And this little fax machine she had was, I would take my sister's fashion magazines, or we'd go to like Ralph's or CVS, and we'd kind of like tear a page or two out of the Thrashers. I'd be like, oh, this is, slide that out there. I'd go home and I'd kind of run it through the fax machine, and I started collaging with a lot of those little parts. So I don't know. I think that also like my sister's fashion magazines. I wish I could show you guys that stuff. God, it's pretty embarrassing to be honest.
do you still have some of those?
Yeah, actually, luckily I kept all of it in like a FedEx box. So it's in the deep storage unit. I used to draw on like random like vinyl, and actually that's another big one too. Was like just being totally broke and being like 15, 16. My friend had a car, so we would drive to LA and we go to Amoeba Records, and couldn't really afford like $20 records, but there was always a dollar bin with like stuff we never heard of. And in there we'd get like, at the time I was like, what are all these records? Like who's Todd Rundgren and Bob Seger? But the design was fire. Like there was just something really amazing about the stuff from the 60s, 70s. And obviously they printed so much of it. It was very popular music. So we'd be able to get like $1 records that had, later to find out all this art was by Hypnosis, Storm Thorgerson. And they're a legendary design duo who's probably one of my biggest influences. But at the time didn't know I was like buying like 10 packs of Storm Thorgerson, Hypnosis records, and like starting to draw on them, paint on them, and cut them up. But that also comes from skateboarding as well.
Yeah, well, and I think your work still has a lot of that kind of sample culture and like this bringing together of different moments from the past, like both literally excerpting it and like sort of rehashing it, or also taking concepts and ideas and kind of reinterpreting them in a new way?
Yes. I feel like the way that I call it flipping the sample. So a lot of I feel like my process, the creative process that I subscribed to from a really young age, wasn't one of design because I did not come from a design background. I didn't really have the resources to know that design was a thing that you could do for a living. In full honesty, I just wanted to make skateboard graphics, T-shirts, stickers. Got like iron-on things from Rite Aid. We used to steal those too. And I think that at a certain point, I realized that like people were really into it, and they're like, "Hey, you should do something for my company, or do something for." And I was like, "Wait, you could do this for a living?"
Do you remember your first commission?
Yes, I do. It was actually it's a shirt for a skateboard company. Anybody here skateboard? Am I talking to 3 people? Yes. Yeah, let's go. Shout out. So it's a skateboard brand called Diamond Supply Co. And I think they turned into like a streetwear brand, but it was definitely like a skateboard hardware brand. But I did a shirt that was like a flip. So again, flipping the sample. I got this Iron Maiden vinyl. I think what's the name of the record? It's the one that has Eddie, who's like the skeleton, and he's got his hand like this as the master, like a puppet. Anyways, I photoshopped a diamond in his hand, and then I changed the text. I got something off DeFont, of course. I still rock DeFont. Like
you and I just, when we first chatted about you coming here, we had a whole discussion about this, and I think the meme then got posted by Dynamo, but it was like early career designers, like, here's DeFont. Mid-career designers, do not use DeFont. Senior designers, welcome back to DeFont.
Yeah, but like what makes it funnier is like it's the little the Ewok
it's the guy in the
guy,
like, yeah.
and one of them with like the black
The
hood,
bell
the monk
curve,
one
yeah.
is like back on DeFont.
Yeah. That's how I picture you in my head.
Yeah, I'm in there. I'm on page like 250, 255. People don't know about that, but yeah. So that was my first commission. I got this Iron Maiden vinyl. I scanned it. I photoshopped a diamond on it. I got a DeFont font. Just wrote "Running Shit Since '98" or something, which was what he wanted me to put there. And it was interesting because like streetwear and skateboarding was I think it was a bit more hip hop, but there was a clash happening where there was a big brand called Baker, and they had like a bunch of guys. We used to call them Hesh, but they would be like skating to rock and tight pants. But then they also had dudes like Antoine Dixon, who was like a black dude with face tattoos, skating to Biggie songs, and it felt like it was just so diverse, and it felt real and inviting. It felt like an actual community of people that actually fucked with each other. And wait, where's it going?
Well, I was asking, I mean, I think something, as someone who also is a fan of archives, something I often feel is like designers are really afraid to show their references and really afraid to make them visible. They feel like they have to sort of obscure the reference in a certain way to make it feel more like an original creation. And I think what I appreciate so much about your work is you very unabashedly show your references while also sort of transmuting them into something so different that it doesn't matter if you know where it came from, it's become something different. I don't know if you agree with that, but I would be sort of curious to hear more about like the process of how, like that idea of flipping the sample, like what does that actually look like in practice? Do you always know how you're going to flip it? Like what's the sort of impulse that happens?
Yeah, I just don't think that you should hide your inspiration. I feel like what's exciting for me is when I watch someone, when I can see how somebody got from A to B. I can see their paper trail. I can see the things that they're obsessed with. One of the things I talk about a lot is obsession. So I think some of my favorite artists or designers, they have very clear obsessions, almost like tics, potentially. You know, it's a bit like Spectrum vibes. You know, like just somebody that like has to turn knobs.
This is what gets you canceled.
I got the supertism myself, but like I feel like the obsession is basically the thing that makes the work completely like personal. And to hide those things is inauthentic to me. I think there's people, okay, so here's another analogy, and I think where I was going with the music stuff was my process, I really see it more like Dilla or Madlib. And I'm digging in the crates. That's like a really important part of my process. The crates can be anything. It can be archive.org. It can be probably like Abe Books. It can be default
Abe
page
Books is the most
5,000.
underappreciated graphic design resource.
Abe
Abe
Books?
Books and Flickr.
I'm gonna say this, like you could go on, like I follow Idea and I'll see them post something and I just type that shit in Abe Books and it's like half price. Shout out Idea Books, sorry guys, but you know, there's a customer for that, but I know where to, you know, you just gotta type that in on Abe Books, get that ISBN, you know, put that bad boy in there.
You want like the waterlog copy that ended up getting sold for like $10.
Yeah, I want the one in the window that's like completely yellow.
Oh yeah, like faded.
Yeah.
Is that Idea?
I don't do the pristine shit. We're gonna like use it, bend pages, tear pages, break the spine. I gotta scan it flat. You know how it goes. Yeah, I feel like the references are important, and I think the music analogy with like Dilla and Madlib, or anybody that produces hip hop records and uses the MPC or samples, that's a culture itself. And that culture is rooted in them being extremely knowledgeable record collectors, period. It's not about like, hey, I found this. And also you can, you know, find a field recording. I think a lot of rap like samples are, actually I was listening to a Kendrick song and there was one that I was like, wait, I know this laugh. And he sampled a laugh from an old like TikTok of like a black uncle at a cookout. But you can
But that like reminds me of the sort of cross-modal sampling, which I think is so important to your design too. You're not a designer who just looks at design. In fact, I think you very rarely look at sort of contemporary graphic design for those sources.
Yeah, I think there was a moment in my mid-20s where I really did though. So like, there's the pro and con of being self-taught. I think that there was a moment where I think probably 22 through 26 was heavy self-doubt, because I think I'm watching a lot of my friends. They're like, yo, just graduating RISD, and they're like, yeah, I just fucking applied for Yale. Yo, I got into Yale, and like, you know, they're getting these big jobs. They're like, yo, I'm at White and Kennedy, and I'm just like, you know, am I gonna do skateboard graphics for the rest of my life? Is that okay? Is that valid? Like, do I wanna do books, posters, branding? And I think there was a moment where I was trying to be like, all right, cool, we gotta look at design and be design. But that's this moment of self-doubt. I think a lot of people go through that in one way or another. And what happened to me in that moment was I was like, I think I hit a point of frustration. I ended up taking a job at some corporate company where I thought that was the answer. I'm like, oh, we're gonna work at this company, and yeah, that's like the move. And the pendulum swung the other way, and I was like, you know what? Like, I felt like I threw in the towel. I was like, I don't.
It's gonna kill your soul.
Yeah, it did. Well, I think what it did was like, it will kill your soul if you comply. And I was like, fuck y'all. Sorry, he's my French Creole Haitian. But I was like, you know what? This isn't exactly what I wanted to do. And what I'm gonna do instead is like stay up nights and weekends and just make stuff with no purpose. And I just started uploading that to Tumblr. And all of a sudden I found that like I created something different. And people were hating on it, actually. A lot of my friends that were, you know, making fonts, they're like, dude, what the fuck is, you know, what is this?
You know how I feel about haters.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in a bit. We actually gotta talk about that. But
Is that the origin of 1201?
Haters?
No, staying up late.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like nicely cryptic, but as a fellow night owl, it's like, yeah, that's when the work starts.
Yeah, I just like, in my group chat, I just send the owl emoji at 3 a.m. and if anyone's up, they'll just reply with it. But yeah, 1201, well, we're jumping in topics, but 1201, the name of 1201 is, I think, not just being a night owl, but it's like a testament to how much those hours are worth. And how even if you have that 8-hour a day, 5-day-a-week job, you still need to utilize, like you might be tired, you might be, like any normal person would be exhausted and want to chill and watch Netflix, but you have to use that time to build whatever your own world is. And that was what I was dedicated to.
And I'm bringing you back on track because I interrupted you. You were talking about how doing that when you were at your corporate job helped you to sort of develop this idea of flipping the sample.
No, I think that the flipping the sample was like, I think that was inherent. But what that job made me, it made me say like, screw traditional design, or like what the idea of a designer is supposed to be. And that was not me saying I'm holier than thou or anything. It was me feeling rejected. It was me feeling like I wasn't good enough to be in Yale or in all these places. And I just started I went into my own lane. I was like, I'm just gonna merge onto the shoulder and drive 60 and not look at anyone. And then all of a sudden, I think I just kind of like looked in the rear view, looked back. I'm like, wait, I'm kind of like, where am I? I'm somewhere different. When I kind of I diverted that inspiration from external to internal, and the motivation and validation from external to internal, just for that time, just for that 1 or 2 summers where I felt like I didn't fit in or didn't belong, and that was the most rewarding thing that I ever did.
Well, I have a quote from you where you said, if you're only looking at and inspired by contemporary references, it's really difficult to bring something completely new to the table based on the current way of thinking, which, you were just talking about, sort of that looking away and sort of putting up those blinders as being actually kind of an asset. And I think that's in contrast a bit to what is encouraged from a lot of the conventional means of design education.
What is encouraged?
I think what's often encouraged is sort of a looking to your nearest neighbor. I think the sort of competitive dog-eat-dog world allows people to sort of think X person is successful and I have to mimic X person in order to be as successful as them. And therefore, you end up only looking at the success of contemporary designers.
Yeah, you have it exactly right. It's an echo chamber. And it's this Ouroboros of like who's going to make the best, brand identity for the same sort of type of client. And I don't know, I think I just I don't think I had the traditional mindset to do that. I would love to do brand identities for a lot of these things, but I realized that I feel like I landed on this epiphany maybe even this winter. I was sitting there trying to do a project that I just couldn't figure out. And I was like, man, and I realized, I was like, I don't think I'm a designer. And I talk about this in like my keynotes, but I've always I feel like I'm an artist that's operating under the guise of design and art direction, but there's some caveats there because you're expected to have a certain rhythm with design. And I think that the best projects I've gotten have been the ones where people are like, hey, we want you to, this is carte blanche, we want you to treat this like an art project. And that kind of turned into the only stuff I show now, even if it was like $500. Sometimes I pay.
Well, and I mean, I think to me, while you might be operating under a sort of conventional contemporary graphic design studio model, the core difference between artist and designer is inward out versus outward in. And I definitely think you embody the sort of inward out approach.
I want to say thank you, but I think about that a lot. I do talk about this.
And I mean, there are pros and cons to both, for sure.
Exactly, yeah. I talk about this in therapy because it's a
we
very...
love to hear that.
It's one of those things where like, one thing she told me that's really valuable is like, I think when you're so used to, and I'm gonna get into like my trauma bag, when you're so used to being the one person that you can rely on, I think that you become very used to being self-sufficient and only looking inward. And I don't think that's exactly something to write home about all the time. I think it's really great to work with community and look around you and have people, I think it comes down to trust. It comes down to belonging, acceptance. But at the end of the day, I feel like there's individuality that we all have as creative people, like everyone in here, and it's our responsibility to do that. Otherwise, it has to be original. That's our job.
Well, one thing I did want to ask you about was one of my favorite tweets of yours of all time, which is, I think someone asked you about how to do some kind of texture, and you said you weren't going to tell them, and then you said, it's really important to gatekeep sometimes. And I kind of love that because I think in some ways it's like gatekeeping your work also allows other people to, it's not because you are egoistically protecting your own thing. It's more about giving other people the opportunity to discover their way of doing it. That's my generous reading.
Exactly. No, exactly. You say it's generous, it's accurate. And I think that, all right, so I feel like, God, I could make a whole talk about just this. But there's something beautiful about how many resources and assets are available to us now. Like I can go on You Work For Them or Supply Family, and I can have like mock-ups, textures, graphic. I mean, I could literally, they sell graphics. So you kind of have a leg up in a way. And okay, let me just backtrack, because they asked me, how did you achieve this halftone? Because obviously it wasn't the halftone filter. And I was just like, that's my halftone. And then they were like, what? Like, and then I think it started a whole like Gen Z anime profile pic, like viral tweet moment where they were like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, he won't give the halftone? This is so stupid. Like, everything should be open source. Resources are for everybody. And I come from like the unpaid internship era. So I'm cut from like that cloth. So I was just like, look, I'm gonna figure it out. You're gonna figure it out. Go in that room, boom. And then we're gonna figure out who comes up with it. And I think it was crazy because I felt like there's a beautiful thing about just having these assets and resources, but I do think that we're robbing people of figuring out things. And like, it's like training wheels. And like, you need to fall off your bike. You need to scrape your knee a couple times, and then you're gonna learn how to actually ride it. Training wheels don't help. And I don't think that assets are training wheels. It's just one analogy. But the halftone was just, I was like, that's just my halftone. It's like, that's like Dilla's 808.
Well, and the halftone is like a amalgamation of years of working in Photoshop. And the thing about Photoshop is there's a million ways to do any one thing. So it's your sort of combined integration of all these tools. And I'm spoiling, I wrote something for It's Nice that's coming out this week that actually has a quote that reminds me of this, which is Robert Beatty, the airbrush illustrator. He said, your style is as much a product of what you can't do as what you can. That it's like, what shortcuts are easiest for you, and what do you, like, if you hate drawing hands, you go into landscape. Like,
yeah, so actually, myself and one of my old mentors, Todd Torso, he was the creative director of a magazine. He hired me. I was an intern. The junior designer quit. He knew I did design, but I was like doing skate graphics. I was 20. He's like, if you can learn InDesign in 2 weeks, you have this job. Take it. I was like, so I just figured out InDesign. But we would
notoriously easy program to learn.
They had me on some like easy stuff. So
yeah, okay.
Cool. But we would stay in there super late at night after we finished all the magazine stuff, trying to figure out how Mario Hugo achieved his textures. We're like, dude, he's not using pencil. This is Photoshop. It's drawing. I think it's a combination of both. But we spent days just trying to like figure it out, and we kind of individually landed on something more unique that we were like really happy with. So it's that journey of trying to like just try to copy it. I think Kanye quote, he was talking about how he remade Explosive by Dr. Dre. Like, that was a very important moment in his career where he sat there and like figured out the exact drum, the exact compression, the exact way to chop the sample, perfect amount of reverb. And he's like, boom, identical. And from there, you are just sharpening your sword. You're not gonna be like, look, I made this beat. You did not make that beat. You recreated it. But along the way, you always find out how these tools work. And I think that's beautiful. You can use a hammer to hit a nail or break a window.
I love that. Yeah, and I think it's something about the fact that, like, in the trial and error process, something, as you said, totally new emerges. And I think that's also why it's so important to learn how to hone skills of observation and critique, to be able to identify the things that you are interested in, and then to be able to sort of refeed those back into your work.
Yeah, the feedback loop. That's the sampler,
I was going to ask.
Wanted to.
Oh, you want to ask me something?
Yes. Let's talk about being a hater.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to just give some context. So Elizabeth wrote a really incredible article. Maybe you guys have seen on It's Nice that about I'm a hater, and the deck was why it's important to have like valid critique.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny you say that because it actually does very much relate to what I just said, where I think the ability to kind of hone your observational and analysis allows you to understand your own taste. I also think the line in there was like, you can't be a hater without being a lover. And I think a lot of it is just about like learning to let yourself feel strongly, to not be worried about kind of aligning your taste or aligning your style with the general population, and also, of course, being both willing to take critique and also give critique. And I think, that sort of like rising tide lifts all boats idea, where sort of culture of critique actually, as you said, kind of like sharpens the sword of the industry as well as the individual. But yes, I feel a kinship with you as a fellow hater.
I love more, but I know where to draw the line.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to like, I mean, obviously the title is kind of provocative, but that point being, I think we have kind of with social media gotten to this point where, because we are all in this industry together, everybody's afraid to say anything critical, and everybody's sort of, can't separate out the individual relationships with the relationship with the work. And I think there's that kind of cycle of emulation you were talking about, of people kind of like looking to their peers to copy. And I think to me, all of that's kind of like part of the same murky stew.
Yeah.
How do you feel about social media?
You just try to type in my name on Instagram.
It doesn't. I will
gone.
say, when we first announced it, it's nice that somebody tagged you in the post, and I had to be like, hey, this is a soccer star like, this is not Hassan.
Also,
Hassan does not have an Instagram like this.
So like there's a really famous Pakistani pop star named Hassan Rahim, but it's Raheem, and he's massive. And every day
That might be who they tagged.
Yeah, every day I get tagged, and like people sing along to his stuff, tagging me. I get messages from people like, "Yo, we got a link, we got a collab." I'm like, "Who's this?" They're like, "Oh, sorry, wrong Hassan." But how I feel about that is, it is part of the echo chamber. I will say that, like, back to the bit you brought up about contemporary references. That's part of it. I think you can't just wake up every morning, brush your teeth, put on your clothes, open the laptop, and then look at everyone's highlight reel. I don't think that's healthy.
Best thing I ever did is I muted, I think, every single story on my Instagram.
Every story?
Every single story, because then it means I only really am going and intentionally, and then I'll every once in a while slowly unmute someone who's like risen to the top, who I think like genuinely posts things that are inspiring or interesting to me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you just get sucked in, and I think it's so toxic to making good work.
Yeah, I think it's an echo chamber. I mean, it's obviously, the algorithm is designed to reinforce your pre-existing thoughts and tastes and interests. It doesn't show you anything new. It's designed to keep you on the app. They know exactly how to manipulate the dopamine reward system. I don't think that it's healthy to post your work in such a way that the engagement dictates how well you did or how good of a project it is. Because I think that unless you work in social media or in marketing, that's obviously very valid. These metrics are valid, but I think there's a lot of other ways to measure these things. And the likes, I think they were even talking about removing like counts and stuff, but it's just cooked. I think that I go on there because it became a necessary evil. It's basically LinkedIn for creative people, right? So you got to.
Well, also stop being fun. It actually was fun, and now I feel like it is just.
It used to be social. It used to be social media. It's not that anymore.
Yeah.
It's just, it's portfolio, and that's cool. Like I think it's I know everybody because of social media. I have a career because of social media. I used to post all those like little skateboard graphics that I made on my cracked Photoshop from LimeWire with the what's it called, the keygen. Do you guys really were you guys there? Were you guys,
I know, raise your hand if you're over 30.
We had to crack the key, serial number. Got mad viruses.
I had to, I felt like I was turning to dust because I had to explain LimeWire to a student recently.
Yeah.
And I was like,
It's like a
I think
single
we're
tear on my cheek.
yeah, I think we're lightly nearing time, but I just wanted to ask, just maybe to close in this, like, if you have any advice for young designers on how to navigate like the digital hellscape of 2024. Like, no, end of Q&A.
Give me a second, because that's a really big ender. Like, how to navigate the thing that we were just talking about isn't always super good for you.
Because I think you, as you said, it is in some ways it's LinkedIn, it's a necessity. But
Yeah.
how do you sort of, in a world where everyone, we're working remotely, we're all online in this way, how do we kind of have our foot in both camps?
I would say that, like, to my advantage at a young age, I was like outside. I was at the club. I was making friends. I was just like around, and as much as I was on social media or whatever, there wasn't a point where I was like super promoting my work on there. I was just like friends with people, and they're like, "Hey, he does design. Do a flyer. Do an album cover." It was all about meeting people, and for me, that was like going out and partying. Like everyone else, that was school. But I think it's really good to like build that community, like really strong friend group of people that are creative and that push each other too, that aren't just like, that same thing about critique. Like my best friends will be like, that's not, nah, no sauce. And I have to go back and they're like,
Gotta have the friends who will tell you when you're lacking in
you
sauce.
have to, they're not, yeah, if they tell you everything's good, they're not here, they're not looking out for you. So foster those friendships. Post your work too. Like you guys might, I'm old. I don't want to be online no more, y'all. But do it. Put it up there. That's what I did.
And I will say one of my favorite things about these events is exactly like getting to see people mingling and talking and thinking about like the people you meet here are the people that are going to be part of your career and part of your, not just career, but part of your life maybe for, the next 20 years. You never know. Or you can just meet them on Twitter like we did.
Yeah, 20 more years.
Yeah.
We'll be chilling in our Italy countryside,
Hey, please.
designing wine bottles.
I think that is all the time we have, but this was amazing. We could talk for another hour, I'm sure.
Can we? Can we do that? Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm kicking you off the stage.